Welcome, sleepy soul. I'm your storyteller tonight, here to help you drift into deep, peaceful sleep. Before we begin, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more bedtime stories. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. And if there's a story you'd like to hear next, I'd love to know that too. I grew up in a small town in western Kentucky, the kind of place where people wave from their porches, and the loudest thing you'd hear after 9 p.m. was a train passing in the distance. My family wasn't bad, not in the way outsiders might think, but something about us always felt off. My dad, Mike, was the kind of man who carried silence like a weapon. He drank quietly, worked quietly, and got angry quietly. My mom, Karen, struggled with depression most of her life, though back then people didn't call it that. They just said she had her bad spells. But the real darkness in our family, the kind you didn't talk about at church or the grocery store, was my cousin, Ryan. Ryan was only a year younger than me, but by the time I turned 17, it felt like he'd already lived 3 lifetimes. He was the kind of kid who'd get suspended 1 week for fighting, then show up the next week acting like he owned the place. He'd brag about stealing beer from gas stations or about how he could talk his way out of getting caught. My Aunt Lynn, his mom, always said he just needed structure. "Boys'll be boys," she'd say with that tired laugh that sounded more like a cry. I used to look up to Ryan when I was a kid. He was wild, fearless, confident, everything I wasn't. But when we hit our late teens, I started to notice the cracks in his personality. There were nights he'd show up at my parents' house, eyes glassy, muttering to himself, pacing the porch while lighting one cigarette after another. My dad would lock the door and say, "Let him ride it out. Don't get involved." But I did. It was the summer of 2013 when I invited Ryan to come stay with me. I'd just gotten my first real place, a 1-bedroom apartment in Bowling Green, close enough to the college I attended, but far enough that I could finally feel independent. I figured it'd be good for him to get away from his parents and that small-town tension that had built up around him. When I picked him up, he looked rough, thinner than I remembered, with bags under his eyes and this twitch in his jaw that wouldn't quit. "Damn, cuz," he said when he saw me. "You look all grown up now. You got air conditioning in that apartment?" I laughed a little. "Yeah, it's not the Ritz, but it's something." He grinned, tossed his duffel bag in the back seat and said, "Good enough for me. Just need a place to crash, maybe clear my head a little." For the first few days, things were fine. We played video games, ordered takeout, stayed up late watching old horror movies. I actually started to believe he'd changed, but then, around the end of the first week, he started disappearing for hours at a time. "Where you been?" I asked one night when he stumbled in close to midnight. He shrugged. "Just out. Met a couple folks around here." "You don't gotta worry about me, man." But I did worry. He reeked of smoke and cheap liquor, and his pupils were always blown wide. It was around that time that weird things started happening in my apartment. I'd wake up in the middle of the night to the sound of the front door unlocking. Ryan would come in, muttering to himself. Sometimes I'd catch him standing in the kitchen, just staring at the wall. One night I said, "You good, man?" He turned to me, that same cold grin spreading across his face. "You ever feel like something's following you?" "What?" He leaned in a little. "Like, something that knows you better than you know yourself. That whispers to you when you try to sleep." I tried to laugh it off. "You mean paranoia?" He didn't laugh. "Nah," he said. "It's real. Been with me since I was a kid. It used to just sit in my room, but lately it's been standing closer." I didn't know what to say. I thought maybe he was high again, but something about the way he said it, the way his eyes darted toward the dark hallway, made me uneasy. 2 nights later, I woke up to the sound of shattering glass. At first, I thought someone was breaking in. My heart jumped into my throat. I grabbed the baseball bat I kept near the bed and crept toward the living room. What I saw made my stomach drop. Ryan was standing there in the middle of the room, shirtless, bleeding from his forearm, smashing my coffee table with a glass bottle. "Ryan!" I shouted. "What the hell are you doing?" He didn't look at me at first. His breathing was heavy, ragged. Then he turned his head slowly, and the look in his eyes. It wasn't him. There was this emptiness, like he was staring through me. "I told you," he whispered. "It's here." "What are you talking about?" He dropped the broken bottle, pointed toward the corner of the room, the one by the window. "It's standing right there." "You don't see it?" I froze. The corner was empty. "Ryan, there's nothing—" "Don't lie to me," he screamed, his voice breaking. "You see it too." "You have to." I raised my hands. Okay. Let's just calm down, all right? Put the bottle down, man." He picked up a lamp, still plugged in, and hurled it at me. It missed by inches, shattering against the wall. That's when I ran for the door. By the time the cops arrived, Ryan was on the floor, screaming and thrashing. It took 3 officers to get him in cuffs. I stood there barefoot, my hands shaking, watching them drag him out. As they shoved him into the back of the cruiser, I'll never forget how he looked at me. Or rather, how he didn't. His eyes were open, but it was like there was no one behind them. Just this hollow, faraway stare. That night broke something in me. I didn't hear from Ryan for months. I figured he was in some sort of rehab or psych ward, but then one day my aunt called. "They arrested him again," she said, crying. "He's been breaking into people's homes. They said he's been stealing things, but..." "But what?" I asked. "They found drawings. Weird drawings. All over the walls of this old farmhouse. He said they weren't his. My blood ran cold." "What kind of drawings?" "Symbols, circles, eyes. He said he was protecting us." Ryan was sentenced to 6 months in county jail. During that time, I wrote him a few letters, half because I felt guilty, half because I wanted answers. He only replied once. In shaky handwriting, he wrote, "You didn't see it that night, but it saw you. It follows bloodlines. It doesn't stop. Lock your windows." That was the last thing I ever got from him. After he got out, I tried to help him. Got him a job at a tire shop, helped him rent a small apartment on the outskirts of town. For a while, it seemed like he was improving. He even started therapy. Then one morning, I got a call from his landlord. "Hey, you're Ryan's cousin, right?" "Yeah, why?" "Well, he ain't been around for a few days. But, I had to go in because of a smell. You might want to come down here." My chest tightened. When I got there, the smell hit me before I even reached the door. Inside, the air was thick, sour, metallic. The curtains were drawn. The walls were covered in black marker, circles, spirals, eyes, everywhere. In the center of the living room was a single word, scrawled over and over again. Family. They found Ryan in the bedroom. The coroner said it looked self-inflicted. But what I remember most was the expression on his face, not fear, not pain, but peace. A few days after the funeral, I was cleaning out his apartment when I found something behind the dresser. It was a photograph, old, yellowed, of my dad, my Aunt Lynn, and a boy I didn't recognize. On the back, written in Ryan's handwriting, were the words, "He was the first one it followed." I don't know who that boy was. My dad refused to talk about it, and sometimes late at night, when I'm alone in my apartment and I catch something move in the corner of my eye, I think about Ryan, about that night, about how he said it follows bloodlines, and I wonder if maybe he wasn't crazy after all. I never thought I'd be the one to tell this story. Growing up, my mom's side of the family was always a little complicated. We weren't close with most of them, and whenever I asked why, she'd just say, "Some people bring bad luck, mijo." You don't need to be around that. I didn't question it much as a kid. But when I got older, I learned that bad luck was her polite way of saying trouble. My cousin's name was Luis, and this story, his story, is something I still struggle to wrap my head around. It's been about 4 years since everything happened. Luis lived in a small town outside of Zacatecas, Mexico, while I've lived my whole life in San Antonio, Texas. We only ever talked once when I was a teenager, back when MSN Messenger was still a thing. Yeah, that's how long ago it was. I was sitting in our living room one evening after school, the old Dell computer humming like it was about to explode, when I got a notification. Luis is online. I barely knew the guy. He was my mom's cousin's son or something, distant enough that we'd never met in person, but close enough that my mom still called his mother her sister. He sent a message. Luis. Hey Primo, how are you? Me. I'm good, you? Luis. All good, bro. I just wanted to ask you something. What clique you roll with over there? At first I didn't get what he meant. Then it hit me. He was talking about gangs. I was 13, hanging around some stupid kids who liked to act tough, tagging up walls and mouthing off to cops. We thought we were hard, but really, we were just bored kids pretending to be something we weren't. So when Luis asked that, I just froze. Before I could even type a reply, my mom walked by and saw the screen. Her whole face changed. ¿Quién es ese? She snapped, leaning over my shoulder. It's Luis, Mom, from Mexico. Luis? Her voice dropped lower. Luis from Fresnillo? I nodded. She made me stand up right then and there and told me to get off the computer. You don't ever message him again. Do you hear me? She said, her tone sharp and final. I was confused. Why? He's family. Because that boy's father is bad news. And his uncle too. Don't ask questions. Just listen to me. But of course I did ask. And that's when I first learned what my family had been hiding. The family you don't talk about. My mom told me that Luis's dad, Rafael, used to be deep in a local gang back in Mexico. Not just some street-level group either. He ran one of the more organized crews in the area, the kind that worked with cartels. His brother Carlos was also part of it, though he'd gone semi-legit as a mechanic after losing his eye in a fight. My mom said the story went that Rafael was getting jumped by a rival crew, and Carlos rushed in to help. One of the rivals swung a morning star, like a damn medieval weapon, and the spike ball hit Carlos square in the face. He lived, but he lost his eye. Mom said that after that, Rafael's reputation grew. People respected him because he didn't back down, she said. But she also made it clear, that kind of respect comes with a price. Luis had grown up in that world. His mom, Rosa, moved to the States years later to make money cleaning houses, sending back whatever she could. But Luis stayed behind with his dad. So when he messaged me that day, Mom knew exactly what kind of life he was being dragged into. He's following the same road as his father, she said. And that road doesn't end anywhere good. After that, she made me block him. I didn't talk to Luis again for years. I didn't hear his name again until about 4 years ago. I was 28 then, working at a warehouse in San Antonio, doing my best to keep my life clean and boring. One night, my mom called me. It was late, around 10 p.m., and she sounded off. They found Luis, she said. My stomach dropped. Found him? What do you mean? They found his body. She paused, then continued, her voice cracking just a bit. Him and his friend. They'd been missing for over a month. They found them both in a ditch outside Guadalupe de Trujillo, hands tied, shot in the head. For a long time, neither of us said anything. I could hear her sniffle quietly, trying to hide it. I told Rosa this would happen, she said. I told her. Nobody in the family knows the full story. Or maybe they do, and they just won't say. But what trickled down through the phone calls and whispers painted a picture that still haunts me. From what I gathered, Luis had been making serious money the year before he died. Nobody knew how. His family said he'd leave town for 2 or 3 weeks at a time, come back with stacks of cash, new shoes, gold chains, sometimes even a new truck. Rosa claimed he worked security, but that was a joke. Everyone knew security meant something else down there. Some cousins said he was part of a crew that hijacked fuel trucks, huachicoleros they're called. They'd siphon off gasoline from Pemex trucks and sell it cheap on the black market. Others whispered he was doing something darker, kidnapping people for ransom. But no one could prove it. Then, sometime in early spring, he and his best friend Elio disappeared. They were last seen leaving town in a black Nissan, heading toward the highway. 2 days later, the car was found burned out near a dry riverbed. No sign of either of them. It took almost 6 weeks before someone reported a smell coming from a ditch near an old gravel road. That's where they found them, hands bound, knees bent like they'd been forced down, 2 gunshots, each one perfectly placed in the skull. No money, no jewelry, no phones, just left there like garbage. The funeral was small. Half the people there were crying. The other half were silent, staring at the coffin like they didn't know how to feel. My mom didn't go. She said it would only reopen wounds. But she sent flowers and told Rosa she was praying for her. Rosa didn't respond. Later, I learned why. Apparently, after Raphael had gone to prison years earlier, Rosa had come back from Texas to save her son. She stayed with him, tried to get him into school again, maybe find honest work. But when she saw the kind of money he was making, she stopped trying. She started letting him bring money home. She even told people her son was helping the community, that he was taking care of them. It was a lie, of course, but when you're poor, lies can be comforting. I visited Mexico 2 years after Luis's death, mostly to see my grandma, but also because part of me wanted to see where he grew up. The town was smaller than I'd imagined. Dusty roads, stray dogs, half-built houses. I went to the mechanic shop where his Uncle Carlos worked. He was older, slower, his face more wrinkled. He recognized me immediately. "You're Rosa's nephew from the States, right?" "Yeah. I just came to pay my respects." He looked at me with that one good eye, long and heavy. "You know, Luis wasn't a bad kid," he said. "He just didn't see another way. When you grow up here, you learn quick. You either make money or you die trying." He spat on the ground, wiped his hands on a rag. What happened to him wasn't random. They wanted to send a message. "He crossed someone he shouldn't have." "Who?" I asked. He shook his head. "That's the thing. Nobody says names around here anymore." That night, I stayed at my grandma's house. It was quiet. Too quiet. Everyone else had gone to bed, but I couldn't sleep. I sat outside on the porch listening to the hum of crickets, the occasional bark of a dog. I don't know what I expected, maybe some sense of closure or understanding, but all I felt was this heavy sadness, like the air itself was thicker here. Around midnight, I heard footsteps in the alley behind the house, slow, dragging. Then someone whispered my name. "Ricardo." I froze. No one there knew me by name except family. My grandma, my aunt, and the cousins. None of them were awake. I got up and walked to the edge of the yard, peering into the darkness. There was nothing there, just shadows and the outline of the old wooden fence. But then I saw something, a small reflection like light bouncing off metal. A chain. The sound of gravel crunching. I called out, "Kin anda ahi?" Silence. Then a faint laugh, low and broken, drifting away into the wind. I went back inside, heart pounding. When I told my grandma the next morning, she just crossed herself and muttered, "He's still restless. Don't go out after dark." Before I left Mexico, I met with one of Luis's old friends, someone who'd been close to him before everything went south. His name was Beto, a quiet guy in his 30s who ran a tire shop now. We met in the back of his shop while he was patching up a truck tire. He didn't look at me when he talked. Luis wasn't just working fuel jobs, he said. He started running with a crew that did pickups. Pickups? You know. People, he said, they'd grab locals suspected of snitching or owing money. Sometimes they'd be handed over to other groups. Sometimes they just vanished. One night he told me he was going to quit, Beto said. He said he wanted to start clean, buy a little place for his mom, maybe move north. Then he sighed. But once you're in, you don't just walk away. About a week after I returned to Texas, my mom called again. "Rosa's gone," she said. Apparently, she'd moved back to the States, quietly. Nobody knew where. One of my aunts said she was living under another name now, somewhere in Arizona. She doesn't talk to anyone from Mexico anymore. And honestly, I don't blame her. Sometimes I still think about that night on the porch. The whisper, the chain, the laugh that didn't sound quite human. I tell myself it was just my mind playing tricks, the power of suggestion, the grief in that place. But every now and then I wake up in the middle of the night and swear I hear my name, drawn out in that same soft voice. Ricardo. Maybe it's guilt. Maybe it's him. Either way, I don't go back to Mexico anymore. Some family secrets should stay buried. I always knew something was off about my stepmother, Janice. Even before she married my father, she carried a kind of stillness around her, a quiet, unsettling calm that made every room colder when she entered. She never smiled long enough for you to believe it was real. Her eyes were the kind that didn't blink when you expected them to. When Dad told us he was remarrying, I was 19 and halfway through community college in upstate New York. My sister, Emma, was 17 and still living at home. My mom had passed when we were little, and Dad had raised us alone. He was lonely, and I understood that. So when he met Janice at some local church event, I didn't judge him. But from the day she moved in, things felt wrong. I remember the first dinner we had after she officially became Mrs. Hall. She'd made some kind of chicken casserole that tasted like cardboard, and she sat across from me, smiling in this polite, tight-lipped way. Dad was over the moon, though. He couldn't stop grinning. "So, Dylan," she said that night, cutting into her food without even looking at me. "How's college going?" "It's good," I said. "I've got finals coming up." She nodded slowly, as if filing away the information. "You studying business, right?" "Accounting," I corrected. She smiled again, a flicker that didn't reach her eyes. "Smart boy." Emma kicked me under the table. She mouthed, "What's her deal?" But I shrugged. That was how things went with Janice. Polite on the surface, weirdly distant underneath. She wasn't openly cruel at first, just detached. Like she was there, but not with us. Over time, though, the mask started slipping. She'd whisper things when Dad wasn't around. Little barbs that sounded like nothing but landed heavy. "Your father doesn't need your opinion on everything. Maybe if you stayed at school more, he and I could have some peace." Or once when I came home early from a weekend trip. "You really shouldn't just show up unannounced, Dylan. People have private lives." I didn't understand what that meant at the time, but later I would. Fast forward a few years, I graduated, got a job in Syracuse, and moved into a small apartment on the east side of town. My life was quiet, but okay. I wasn't close to Dad anymore, though. Janice made it hard. Whenever I visited, she found reasons to disappear with him or start arguments out of thin air. Then, out of nowhere, Dad called me one afternoon. "Hey, kiddo," he said, voice sounding lighter than I'd heard in years. "I filed for divorce." I almost dropped my phone. "Wait, are you serious?" He chuckled. "Dead serious. You guys were right. About everything. I don't even know how I didn't see it before." "What happened?" I asked. He hesitated. "Let's just say she wasn't who I thought she was." He didn't say much more, and I didn't push him. He was going on a short business trip to Chicago, and told me when he got back, I could move in with him while I saved up for a house. I was excited. It had been years since I felt close to my dad. That night, I sat in my empty apartment surrounded by boxes. Everything I owned was packed, ready to move in just 2 days. It should have been one of the happiest nights of my life. But instead, it became the most terrifying. It was around 2:43 in the morning when I first heard it. A soft, repetitive tap, tap, tap at my bedroom window. I thought it was just the maple tree outside. The wind had been strong all day, and the branches sometimes brushed against the glass. But the tapping grew louder, sharper, deliberate. Tap, 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 tap. I sat up in bed, my heart racing. Jesus, I muttered, rubbing my eyes. I got up, pulled back the curtain. Nothing. Just the reflection of my own tired face in the dark glass. The night outside was dead silent. Still, the sound had felt too intentional. I checked the latch. Locked. I stood there for a few seconds, listening. Then it stopped. I went to the kitchen for some water, trying to calm myself down. But when I came back down the hallway, I froze. There was someone standing in my bedroom. A woman. Her back was to me, shoulders slightly hunched, long hair hanging down over a beige coat. My breath caught in my throat. "Hey, hey!" I shouted. She turned around. It was Janice, my stepmother. For a second, my mind couldn't even process it. "Janice?" I stammered. "What the hell? How did you even get in here?" She just smiled. A slow, eerie smile that made my stomach turn. "Hello, darling," she said softly. Her voice was calm, too calm. "I've missed you." "What?" I took a step back, scanning her face. Her eyes looked glassy, almost lifeless, and her skin was pale, like she hadn't seen daylight in weeks. "You need to leave," I said, voice trembling. "Now. I'll call the cops if I have to." Her expression changed, a faint flicker of anger beneath that mask of calm. "Oh, you'll call your father, won't you?" she said bitterly, "just like you always do. Always running to him, always making him choose. What are you talking about?" She tilted her head, eyes narrowing. "You took him from me, Dylan. Just like you took him." I blinked. "What the hell does that mean?" She didn't answer. She just stepped closer. I could smell her. A mix of perfume and something foul, metallic. "Janice, listen," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Dad doesn't want to see you, all right? You need to leave." Right now, she laughed then. A short, cracked laugh that didn't sound human. "Oh, I know he doesn't. He doesn't want anyone anymore. Because of you. What the hell are you?" And before I could finish, she lunged at me. Her hands were ice cold when they hit my shoulders. I stumbled backward and crashed into the dresser. She was screaming something, words I couldn't make out, but her face was twisted in rage, spittle flying from her mouth. "Stop! Get off me!" I shouted, pushing her away. She was stronger than I remembered, unnaturally strong. I managed to shove her back and sprinted toward the kitchen, nearly slipping on the hardwood. My phone was on the counter, but before I could grab it, I felt her grip around my arm again. "I won't let you take him," she screamed, pulling me back. "You took my boy." "What boy?" I yelled. "I don't even know what you're talking about." Her eyes. God, her eyes. They were wide and bloodshot, her pupils tiny like pinholes. "You know damn well," she shrieked. "You and your whore mother. You took my son from me." That made me stop for half a second. "What the hell do you mean, your son?" She didn't answer. She just kept repeating, you took him," under her breath like a chant. I managed to twist free and dart back toward my bedroom. I slammed the door shut and shoved a chair under the knob. She pounded on the other side, screaming my name. "Dylan, you owe me my boy." I backed into the corner, shaking. My phone was in my pocket this time. I dialed 911 with trembling fingers. 911, what's your emergency? Someone broke into my apartment, I whispered. "It's my stepmother. She's insane. She attacked me." "Sir, are you in a safe location?" "I locked her in my bedroom, but she's trying to break through the door." "Officers are on their way. Stay where you are." Her pounding got louder. Wood splintered near the handle. I grabbed the nearest thing, a heavy lamp, and stood ready to swing. "Dylan," she screamed. "He's mine! You can't take him from me again." And then suddenly silence. The pounding stopped. The quiet was worse. I could hear my own breathing, ragged and shallow, then faintly, a whisper. "Don't worry, sweet boy." I found him. I found my son again. I froze. "Janice?" No answer. Sirens blared in the distance. The cops kicked the door open minutes later. They found her sitting on my bedroom floor, rocking back and forth, muttering to herself. Her hands were covered in blood, my blood from where her nails had scratched me, and she was holding something small and metallic. When they pulled it from her hand, it was my baby photo. One Dad kept in the living room, from before Mom died. She'd stolen it from their house, apparently. When they arrested her, she kept whispering the same thing. He looks just like him. My baby boy. My Luke. I don't know who Luke was. Dad never mentioned a Luke, but after everything that happened, I asked him about it. He went pale. Luke was Janice's son, he said finally. He died when he was 6, long before I met her. Car accident, I felt my stomach drop. She never got over it, Dad said quietly. I think maybe that's why she fixated on you. You were about his age when she met me. It's been 5 years since that night. Janice was institutionalized after her trial. The doctor said she suffered from severe dissociative psychosis rooted in unresolved grief, whatever that means. I still live in upstate New York. I still lock every window before bed. Sometimes when I wake up in the middle of the night, I swear I hear that tapping again. Tap, tap, tap. I tell myself it's the wind, but deep down I know better. Because every time I dream of her, she's whispering the same words. Don't worry, sweet boy. Mommy's here now. I never thought moving back home after college would end up being the biggest mistake of my life. It was the fall of 2018, and I'd just finished my degree in sociology at a small university in Oregon. I had a job lined up in Portland, but things fell through last minute. Rent was expensive, and I figured staying with my parents in rural Washington for a few months wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. I told myself it would be temporary, a short pit stop before I figured things out. But there's something about coming back home as an adult that hits different. The house feels smaller, quieter. The air is heavy with memories you thought you'd outgrown. My parents, Mark and Linda, had always been a little secretive, not in a suspicious way, just guarded. My dad was a stoic man, ex-construction worker, the kind who'd say 5 words where one would do. My mom, on the other hand, was this overly cheerful woman who seemed to hide behind a smile that never quite reached her eyes. We lived in a small, creaky 2-story farmhouse on the edge of a logging town called Alder Creek, population barely 3,000. The kind of place where people still waved when they drove by but also talked about you the moment your back was turned. The first few nights back home were uneventful. I slept in my old room, which hadn't changed since high school. Same posters, same crooked blinds, same faint smell of old wood and detergent. But after about a week, little things started happening. It began with noises. Around midnight, I'd hear faint thuds coming from downstairs. Not the normal settling sounds an old house makes, but deliberate footsteps. Slow, uneven, like someone was trying not to be heard. One night I asked my dad about it over dinner. Hey, you been hearing stuff moving around downstairs lately? I asked, cutting into a piece of overcooked chicken. He froze mid-bite. No. Why? I don't know. Just sounds like someone walking around late at night. He glanced at my mom, then back at me. Probably the wind. This old place groans when it gets cold. Mom gave a small laugh that felt forced. Yes, sweetheart. You always had an overactive imagination, remember? That tone. I hated that tone. It was the same one she used when I asked why we never visited Uncle Ray's old property out by the woods. Uncle Ray. Growing up, he was the black sheep of the family. My dad's older brother. He lived alone deep in the forest about 20 miles from town, in a sagging old house filled with junk, rusted car parts, broken appliances, piles of old newspapers. People around town said he was crazy, but no one ever said why. When I was 10, I saw him once. He showed up at our house unannounced, standing barefoot in the driveway, mumbling to himself. His hair was long and wild, and his clothes were stained with mud. My dad made me go inside and lock the door. I remember hearing them yelling outside. My dad's voice firm and low, Ray's higher and desperate. That was the last time I saw him. Until I moved back home. It was early November when things really started getting weird. I woke up one night to a faint scratching sound. At first I thought it was a tree branch brushing against the siding, but when I looked toward my door I realized the sound was coming from inside. Scratch, scratch, scratch. "Dad?" I called out. No answer. The scratching grew louder, quicker, like someone dragging their nails down the wood. My chest tightened, and my hands started shaking. I fumbled for the lamp, turned it on, and the noise stopped instantly. Everything was silent. The next morning I told my mom. She waved it off. "Probably mice," she said, pouring herself coffee. "Mice don't jiggle door handles," I muttered. Her smile faltered. Just for a second. Then it was back. "You've been under a lot of stress, honey. Maybe take a break from all that true crime stuff you watch." I let it go. But that night around 2 a.m. I heard it again. This time, footsteps in the hall, soft but heavy. I sat up, every nerve in my body on edge. Then I heard a voice. Low, raspy, coming from just outside my door. "Let me in." I froze. My mouth went dry. "Dad?" Silence. Then a deep, guttural laugh. I bolted out of bed and ran to my parents' room, slamming the door behind me. My dad sat up instantly. "What's wrong?" "There's someone in the house," I gasped. "Someone outside my room." He jumped up, grabbed the baseball bat from under the bed, and stormed into the hallway. I followed close behind, heart pounding. We checked every room, every window, every lock, nothing. No sign of forced entry. But the smell. There was this awful smell lingering near the staircase, like wet dirt and rot. My dad wrinkled his nose. "Christ, what is that?" Mom appeared in her robe, pale as a ghost. "Mark, don't." "What do you mean, don't?" he snapped. "There's someone sneaking around this damn house." Her hands trembled. "Just leave it alone. Please." That was the first time I'd ever seen fear in her eyes. Real fear. The next day I tried to bring it up again, but my dad shut me down. "Drop it, Caleb. I don't want to talk about it. That name, Caleb, that's me." But I couldn't drop it. The unease hung over the house like fog. That night I stayed up late scrolling through old town records online, and that's when I found it. A newspaper clipping from 2006, local man escapes state hospital, police search ongoing for Raymond Harker. Raymond, Uncle Ray. He'd been institutionalized after an incident on his property. No details, just a note about violent psychosis and delusional episodes. My stomach twisted. I ran downstairs, the floorboards creaking under my feet. My parents were in the living room, the TV flickering softly. "Why didn't you tell me about Uncle Ray?" I demanded. My dad sighed heavily. "Because it's not something you need to know." "He escaped a hospital, Dad. Don't you think that's important?" Mom's voice was barely above a whisper. "They found him. They took him back years ago. Then why the hell are we still acting like we're being watched?" Silence. The kind that stretches too long. My dad rubbed his face. "Because we were. He came back once before. Tried to break in when? Couple years after you left for school. We never told you. Didn't want you worrying." My heart sank. "So what? He's still out there?" "I don't know," Dad muttered. "But if he is, he won't come here again." He was wrong. 3 nights later, I woke up to glass breaking. A crash, followed by heavy footsteps. I jumped out of bed, grabbed my phone, and bolted for the hallway. "Dad!" I yelled. But the sound I heard next wasn't my father's voice. It was whispering. Coming from downstairs. I peeked over the railing. The front window was shattered, cold air pouring in. Muddy footprints led straight into the kitchen, and standing there, silhouetted by the moonlight, was a figure. Tall, filthy, wild hair hanging over his face. He was holding something shiny in one hand. A knife. Ray. My dad's voice thundered behind me. Don't you move. Uncle Ray turned slowly, his eyes hollow, his grin showing the dark gaps where teeth should have been. You never should have buried her, he rasped. She's still talking. Before I could even process it, he lunged. My dad swung the bat and the sound of wood cracking against bone filled the air. My mom screamed. I backed up against the wall, shaking so bad I could barely breathe. Ray collapsed, moaning, his words slurred and wet. Y'all shouldn't have kept her down there. My dad called 911. The cops came. They took him away. Again. But I'll never forget the look in his eyes as they dragged him out. The way he stared at me like he knew something I didn't. Weeks later, the sheriff came by to check in. He said Ray was back in a secure facility. He won't be bothering y'all again, he promised. But the house hasn't felt the same since. Sometimes at night I hear faint scratching under the floorboards. Sometimes the basement door creaks open on its own. And sometimes, when I wake up in the middle of the night, I swear I can hear a voice whispering through the vent, low, guttural, broken. Let me in. I grew up in a small town called Brookvale, about 40 minutes outside of Louisville, Kentucky. It was the kind of place where everyone knew each other, where news traveled faster than the mail, and where people still left their front doors unlocked. Our house sat on the edge of town, near a stretch of woods that led down to an old creek bed. My parents, my older brother Ryan, and I lived there along with my mom's sister, Aunt Lorna. She'd been with us for as long as I could remember. She wasn't like other adults, not mean, not cruel, just off. There was always something distant about her, like she was half there and half somewhere else. She'd space out mid-conversation, her eyes drifting to the wall like she was listening to something no one else could hear. When I was a kid, I didn't think much of it. She'd bake cookies, tell strange stories, hum old hymns under her breath. But as I got older, around 14 or 15, things started to shift. It started small, Lorna disappearing for hours, sometimes a whole day, without telling anyone. Mom would brush it off, saying she probably went into town or to the church thrift store. But sometimes she'd come back covered in scratches, tiny ones on her arms, big ones on her neck. When I asked about them once, she smiled this half-crazed smile and said, "Some things in the woods don't like being found." I laughed it off, but that sentence stuck in my head for weeks. My mom, Caroline, was the glue in our house. She worked double shifts as a nurse at St. Luke's Hospital, and even when she came home exhausted, she'd still cook, clean, and check on everyone. Dad, Tom, was quieter, a mechanic. He'd get up at 5 every morning, have his coffee, read the paper, and be out the door before sunrise. Ryan was 17 then, always out with his friends or working on his old Chevy in the garage. We didn't talk much anymore. And then there was Aunt Lorna, always hovering, always muttering to herself, always looking at me in a way that made me feel like she could see through me. One night I found her sitting on the back porch with her hands cupped together like she was holding something. "What you got there, Aunt Lorna?" I asked. She turned slowly, her expression blank. "Shh," she whispered. "You'll scare it." I looked closer. Her hands were empty. By the time I was 15, things in the house were tense. Mom and Dad whispered a lot behind closed doors. I'd hear words like treatment, episodes, and we can't afford it. Then one Friday night, Lorna just vanished. Mom was frantic, called every relative, every neighbor. Dad even drove around town looking for her. "She's done this before," I remember him saying, trying to calm Mom down. "She always comes back." But she didn't. Not for 6 days. When she finally walked through the door, she looked wrecked. Her hair was tangled, her clothes were ripped, and she had deep scratches all up her arms, like she'd clawed through thorns or herself. "Where the hell have you been?" Dad demanded. She just smiled and said, "You shouldn't go near the creek at night." "It listens," Mom cried. Ryan muttered, She's out of her damn mind, under his breath. I didn't say anything, but that night I heard her talking in her room, not muttering like usual, arguing, whispering, pleading, then laughing. There was no one in there with her. A few weeks later, little things started disappearing. At first it was pens, books, even the TV remote. We blamed Ryan. He was forgetful. But then Mom's necklace disappeared, then Dad's pocket knife, then Ryan's old laptop. We searched the house top to bottom. Nothing. One afternoon I came home early from school and heard footsteps upstairs. I thought it was Mom, but when I turned the corner into Ryan's room I froze. Lorna was in there, her back to me, rummaging through his dresser drawers. She didn't even flinch when I spoke. "Aunt Lorna, what are you doing?" She turned around, clutching Ryan's laptop. Her eyes were wide, her breathing fast. "I'm borrowing it," she said. "For what?" Her smile stretched unnaturally. "To keep the voices busy." I stood there unsure what to say. Then she brushed past me and shut her door. About a month later, everything came to a head. It was late, past midnight, and the house was quiet, except for the hum of the fridge downstairs. I woke up because I heard my door creak open. I always lock my door. Always. When I rolled over, I saw it was cracked halfway open. I sat up, my heart thudding. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Soft, dragging footsteps in the hallway. "Mom?" I whispered. No answer. I lay still, staring at the door until I finally saw her. Lorna. Standing there. Barefoot. Her hair was a mess, her nightgown torn. She was holding something in her hand. It was a glass vase from the living room. "Lorna," I said softly. She tilted her head, eyes glassy. "They said you took something from them." My stomach dropped. "What are you talking about?" "The things that live under the floorboards." She stepped closer. I could hear her breathing, raspy and uneven. "Give it back," she whispered. I slid out of bed, backing up toward the wall. "Aunt Lorna, you need to go lie down." She didn't listen. Her voice turned low, almost animal-like. "They're angry. They told me to take it back." When she raised the vase, I screamed. Dad burst in seconds later, his face white. He grabbed her wrist before she could swing, shouting, "Lorna! What the hell are you doing?" She shrieked, this horrible guttural sound, and dropped the vase. It shattered, glass flying everywhere. Mom ran in behind him, grabbing Lorna by the shoulders. "Stop it, stop!" But Lorna wasn't even looking at them anymore. She was staring right at me. Her voice cracked. "It's already inside him." That's when she started laughing. Not just a laugh. This deep, manic cackle that didn't sound human. Dad wrestled her to the ground, yelling for Ryan to call 911. Mom tried to hold her down, but Lorna kept thrashing, her nails digging into the carpet until they bled. I ran into the hallway, trembling, while she screamed from inside my room. I could hear her shouting words that made no sense. "They're under the creek, it's in the walls, it's in him." When the police finally arrived, they had to sedate her to get her into the ambulance. They took her to a psychiatric facility in Louisville. The doctor said she had severe paranoid schizophrenia, probably untreated for years. They said the voices, the delusions, it was all part of her illness. Mom cried for days. Dad stopped talking altogether. But even after she was gone, the house felt off. Little things still disappeared. Strange scratching noises came from the vents at night. Sometimes when I was half asleep, I'd swear I could hear whispering, just beneath the floorboards. Mom said it was my imagination. Then one afternoon I went into Lorna's old room to help pack up her things. Her dresser was mostly empty, but when I opened the bottom drawer, I froze. Inside were dozens of small objects. Mom's missing jewelry, Ryan's old phone, the missing pens and keys. But there were other things too. Tiny wooden carvings of faces, old coins, small animal bones tied together with thread, and at the very bottom, A small glass jar filled with muddy water. There was something inside it. It looked like a tooth. I showed it to Dad, but he just muttered, "Throw it away." Don't go digging into her madness. So I did. I threw everything in a box and dumped it by the creek that night. But when I walked home, I swear I could hear something moving in the trees. A wet, dragging sound. It's been over a decade since that night. I'm 27 now. I live 3 hours away in Nashville. Mom still visits Lorna at the psychiatric hospital once a month. She says she's calmer now, mostly quiet. But every once in a while, she'll ask about me. Last week, Mom told me something that made my blood run cold. She doesn't talk much, Mom said, but when she does, she keeps saying the same thing. Over and over, I asked what she said. Mom hesitated, then repeated it softly. "Tell him the thing in the jar isn't gone." I didn't know what to say. I hung up and sat there in silence for a long time. That night, when I went to bed, I swore I heard something drip, once, twice, from somewhere under the floorboards. And just before I fell asleep, I could have sworn I heard a voice whisper, low, almost tender, right beside my ear. "You shouldn't have thrown it away." I never thought I'd end up naming my first child after a ghost story, but that's exactly what it feels like now. When I was a kid, my grandmother and I were inseparable. Her name was Helen. Everyone called her Nana. She had that soft, old lady smell of lavender soap and vanilla candles. Her kitchen always smelled like warm biscuits and bacon grease, and she never failed to hum old country tunes while she cooked. My mom used to joke that I was more her child than hers, because whenever something went wrong, a fight with friends, bad grades, heartbreak, I'd drive straight to Nana's place. She passed away 3 weeks before my daughter was born. Massive stroke. No warning. 1 minute she was humming along to Patsy Cline. The next she was gone. Losing her hit me harder than I expected. I was 8 months pregnant, swollen and exhausted, and all I could think about was how she'd never get to meet my baby. I used to sit in my car after visiting the cemetery, rubbing my belly, whispering to the baby about her great-grandmother, the woman who'd taught me to make sweet tea, who'd stayed up late watching storms with me on the porch. When the time came, I named my daughter Maggie, after Nana's middle name, Margaret Helen. It felt right. My husband, Ryan, didn't even hesitate. "Yeah, Maggie's perfect," he said, smiling while holding her for the first time. "She looks like a Maggie already." For the first few years, life was normal. Just sleepless nights, baby giggles, and all the chaos of being new parents. Then came her 5th birthday. That night's burned into my memory. It was late, around 8:30, and I just tucked her into bed. She had that little pink nightlight glowing in the corner, the one shaped like a bunny. I remember because she refused to sleep without it. I kissed her forehead, brushed back her hair, and said softly, "Good night, baby. Love you to the moon," she mumbled. "Love you, Mommy." Half asleep already, clutching her stuffed bear, I went back downstairs, poured myself a glass of wine, and started cleaning up after dinner. Nothing unusual. Around 9 o'clock, I walked past her room on the way to grab my phone charger. That's when I heard her. Not crying, not talking, making noises. Little gasping sounds, like she was scared or struggling to breathe. My heart jumped into my throat. I pushed her door open just enough to peek in, and there she was, tossing lightly under the covers, whispering something I couldn't quite catch. I moved closer, crouched by her bed, and whispered, "Hey, sweetheart, it's okay. You're dreaming." She didn't wake up, just sighed, turned over, and went still. I stood up, ready to tiptoe out, when her voice stopped me cold. "Mommy," she said, in this sleepy, uncertain tone. "Yeah, baby, it's me," I whispered back. There was a short pause. Then, in a voice too calm for a half-asleep 5-year-old, she asked, "Do you remember when I was the mommy and you were the baby?" I froze. "What?" I asked quietly, thinking maybe I misheard. She didn't repeat it. She just smiled slightly, not creepy, just content, and rolled back over. Her breathing slowed. She was out. I stood there, staring at her, my skin prickling. My first thought was that it was just some weird kid dream stuff. Kids say strange things all the time. Still, the words echoed in my head all night. When I went back downstairs, I texted Ryan, who was working a late shift at the plant. Me. Maggie just said something weird in her sleep. Ryan. Weird how? Me. She asked if I remembered when she was the mommy, and I was the baby. Ryan. Lol, what? That's creepy. Probably just something from TV or her dolls. Me. Yeah, maybe. I tried to laugh it off, but the more I thought about it, the less funny it seemed. Because it hit me I'd named her after my grandmother. And Nana used to tell me stories about the cycle of souls. How people sometimes come back in their family line. I always thought it was just Southern superstition, some old folk talk. That night, though, I wasn't so sure. The next morning, over pancakes, I asked her gently, "Hey, Magpie, do you remember talking to me last night, when you woke up for a bit?" She frowned. I didn't wake up. "You said something funny," I said, smiling. "You asked if I remembered when you were the mommy and I was the baby." Her fork froze halfway to her mouth. "I said that?" "Yeah." She just shrugged. "I don't remember, Mommy." Then she went back to her pancakes like nothing happened. I didn't push it. But over the next few weeks, little things started to happen that I couldn't explain. She started calling my mom Mary, which was weird because we'd never called her by her first name around Maggie. She'd say things like, "Mary, your hair looks shorter now." Or, "You finally painted that porch, huh?" Mom would just laugh and say, "Well, ain't she something?" But I could tell it rattled her too. One afternoon, while I was folding laundry, Maggie sat cross-legged on the living room floor, coloring quietly. Out of nowhere, she said, "I used to live in a house with a yellow door." I looked over. "What do you mean?" She didn't look up. "Before this, before you were my baby." I tried to keep my voice steady. "Where was the house?" "By the river," she said. "With that big oak tree in the swing, the one you used to fall off." My breath caught. That sounded exactly like Nana's house. The one I grew up visiting every weekend. The one that had a big oak tree out front. The one with a yellow door. I hadn't shown Maggie any photos of it. Later that night, I called my mom. "Mom," I said, "Maggie's been saying some strange stuff. About the yellow door. About the house by the river." There was silence for a few seconds. Then Mom sighed. "She's 5, she said. Kids make things up." "I know, but she's not making it up, is she?" Her voice cracked on that last word. I felt my stomach drop. "What do you mean?" Mom didn't answer right away. Then she said quietly, "When you were little, you used to tell me the same thing about Nana. You'd tell me stories she said you couldn't have known. About the farm, about the storm that took the barn down. Things you couldn't have remembered." I just sat there, phone pressed against my ear, goosebumps rising on my arms. "She always said you two had an old soul connection," Mom continued. "Maybe it's come full circle." That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Nana's face, her soft smile, her wrinkled hands, her voice saying, "You'll understand one day, darlin'." A few days later, I walked past Maggie's room again around bedtime. She was sitting up in bed, talking softly to someone. "Mags?" I asked, pushing the door open. "Who are you talking to?" She looked up wide-eyed. "Nobody. I was just telling a story." About what?" Her little face went serious. "About when I was old. Before you were here." My heart pounded. "Before I was here?" She nodded, eyes shining in the low light. "But I'm glad I came back, Mommy. I missed you." I stood there, frozen, unable to speak. She smiled sleepily, pulled her blanket up, and said, "Good night, baby." It took me a few seconds to realize she'd said baby, not Mommy. I barely slept that night. In the morning, she acted like nothing happened, drew pictures, played with her dolls, laughed like the same old Maggie. But sometimes, when she looks at me with those deep brown eyes the same color as Nana's, I swear I see something ancient in them. Something that remembers more than a 5-year-old should. And even though I still don't believe in ghosts or reincarnation, every now and then, when I tuck her in and she says, "Love you, baby," I can't help but whisper back, "Love you too, Nana." I grew up in a small town just outside of Knoxville, Tennessee. Back then, it was all quiet roads, old oak trees, and a neighborhood where everyone knew everyone. My sister and I were close, closer than most siblings, I think. Her name's Lily, and even though she's 2 years older, we used to act like twins. We'd ride our bikes down to the creek, steal popsicles from the freezer, and talk about everything: crushes, fears, dreams, all of it. But as we got older, things changed. Slowly at first, then all at once. Lily got distant. It wasn't just teenage mood swings. She stopped hanging out with her friends, stopped smiling like she used to. Her laugh, the one that used to make everyone else laugh, disappeared. Mom and Dad thought it was just a phase, but I could tell something deeper was going on. I tried asking, but she always brushed me off. "Just tired," she'd say. Or, "You wouldn't get it." And maybe I didn't. That summer, I came up with the idea to go camping, just the two of us. I thought maybe getting away from everything, phones, school, people, would help us reconnect. She agreed, kind of reluctantly, but she agreed. We drove up to this remote area called Pine Hollow Ridge, about 2 hours from home. It wasn't one of those manicured campgrounds with families and bathrooms. Nah, this was real wilderness: tall trees, soft earth, and a silence that could swallow sound whole. The first night was perfect. We set up the tent by a small lake, built a fire, and roasted marshmallows like we used to as kids. Lily even laughed, really laughed, when I almost dropped mine into the fire. "Still can't roast one right, huh?" she teased, nudging me. "Hey, it's caramelized, not burnt," I said, holding up the sticky mess. She grinned, shaking her head. "You always were a disaster." For a moment it felt like I had her back. My big sister, the one who'd braid my hair and sing off-key in the car. But by the second day, something felt off. Lily started acting weird. Every morning, she'd wake up before me and wander into the woods with her old paper map, one she'd bought from a gas station on the way up. I figured she was just hiking alone, clearing her head. But one evening, I noticed her tracing lines on that map over and over, her finger landing on a tiny spot she'd circled in red ink. "What's there?" I asked, sitting down beside her. She folded the map quickly, almost defensively. "Nothing. Just looking." "Looking for what?" "Don't worry about it, Jess," she muttered. "It's not important." But it was important. I could tell. The next day, she walked to the small town about 5 miles away, said she needed supplies. She didn't come back for hours. When she did, she looked pale, jittery, like she hadn't blinked the whole time she was gone. "What happened?" I asked. "Nothing," she said, brushing me off. "Just, people here know things." "What kind of things?" She didn't answer, just turned her back and stared at the woods like she was waiting for something to move. That night, I woke up around 4 a.m. to silence. No wind, no bugs, just the sound of my own breathing. And Lily's sleeping bag was empty. I grabbed a flashlight, pulled on my boots, and stepped into the woods. The air was damp, cold, and thick. I called her name over and over. The sound barely carried. After what felt like hours, I found her. She was sitting cross-legged in a small clearing, just 10 feet away from where our campsite ended, though I swear I'd walked that spot before. "Lily," I said, trying not to sound panicked. "What are you doing out here?" She turned her head slowly and smiled. "I found it." My stomach twisted. "Found what?" Her smile widened, eyes glassy and bright in the flashlight beam. "The doorway." I looked around. There was nothing there. Just dirt, pine needles, and a faint circular patch on the ground like something had been scraped or burned into it. "Lily, what the hell are you talking about?" She knelt and ran her fingers over the dirt, tracing an uneven shape. "This is it." I knew it was real. "They said it only shows itself if you believe it." "Who's they?" "The locals," she whispered, still staring at the ground. "They told me about the portal in Pine Hollow. Said it was a gate between worlds. Most people can't find it, but I knew I could." I took a step back, my skin crawling. "Okay, that's enough," I said. You're scaring me. Let's go back to camp. She looked up at me, eyes wide and wet. You don't believe me, do you? Lily, you never believe me. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. Over the next few days, she got worse. Barely ate, barely spoke. She'd sit at that clearing for hours, muttering to herself, sketching that same symbol in the dirt over and over. A circle with a line through the middle, like a crooked eye. I tried to distract her, suggested hiking, swimming, even heading home early, but she just kept saying, "Not yet. It's almost ready." The morning we were supposed to leave, I woke up to find her gone again. I already knew where to look. When I reached the clearing, I froze. Lily was standing in the center of the symbol, barefoot, her arms stretched toward the sky. Her hair hung loose, her eyes closed. "Lily!" I yelled, running toward her. She didn't move, didn't even flinch. Then she spoke. "This is your fault," she said, her voice flat, distant. "You're the reason it won't open." I stopped cold. "What are you talking about?" Her eyes snapped open, and she looked right at me, not through me, but at me, like she was seeing me for the first time. "You ruined it," she whispered. Then she started to cry deep, ugly sobs that made her whole body shake. I rushed forward, grabbed her shoulders, tried to pull her away, but she fought me, screaming that I didn't understand. Eventually, I dragged her back to the car. She didn't speak the whole ride home, except once. "I hate you," she said quietly, staring out the window. When we got home, Lily went straight to her room. She didn't come out for dinner, didn't say a word to Mom or Dad. The next morning, she was gone. She'd packed a single bag and left a note that said, "Don't look for me. I found where I belong." That was 4 years ago. She blocked my number, never answered messages, but every once in a while, I check her Facebook. She's engaged now, living in Oregon. From the pictures, she looks happy, or at least she's pretending to be. Sometimes I drive back to Pine Hollow, to that same campsite. The clearing is still there, though the symbol's gone like it was never carved in the first place. But one thing still gets me. Every time I go, I swear I hear something faint, a whisper in the trees. Sometimes, if I stay long enough, I hear my name, and it sounds just like Lily. I was never really close with my grandparents. Not because I didn't want to be, but because something about them always felt off. My friends used to tell stories about their grandparents baking pies, taking them fishing, or cheering from the bleachers during school games. Mine, they lived in an old farmhouse about 40 minutes outside of town, surrounded by acres of empty land and woods so dense you could lose yourself in them. My mom used to say it was peaceful. To me, it just felt isolated. Every visit to their place was like stepping into a different world, quiet, stale, and heavy with the kind of silence that makes you whisper even when no one's asleep. My grandfather, Walter, was a mountain of a man. 6'7", maybe 8, with shoulders so broad he filled a doorway. His voice was low and rough, and he always looked at me like I was doing something wrong even if I was just sitting there. "Sit up straight, boy," he'd rumble whenever I slouched. My grandmother, Lydia, was the opposite. Tiny, frail, soft-spoken, always wearing those floral house dresses and a little silver cross around her neck. She smiled often, but it wasn't a comforting kind of smile. It was like she was forcing it, as if her face didn't quite remember how to be gentle anymore. Despite her small frame, something about her always made me more nervous than my grandfather did. When I was younger, I figured they were just weird old people. Every family has a couple, right? But as I got older, little things started standing out. There were no family pictures in their house, none of my dad, none of us grandkids, just framed paintings of landscapes, and one black and white portrait of the two of them that looked off somehow. I remember asking once, "Grandma, don't you have any pictures of Dad when he was little?" Her hand froze halfway to the teapot. "Your father didn't like being photographed much," she said with a tight smile. That was a lie. I'd seen old photos of Dad at school, at baseball games, smiling with friends. He was plenty comfortable in front of a camera. When I told him about it later, he just sighed. Don't worry about it. They were always like that. Just old-fashioned, I guess. But even he didn't sound convinced. Dad never liked talking about his parents. He said he spent most of his teenage years at a boarding school upstate. They didn't really want a kid around. He once admitted after a few beers. Mom thought they just didn't know how to show love. I think they didn't care to learn. He barely visited them himself, which made it weird that he still tried to get me and my younger sister Lena to visit every few months. They're not getting any younger, he'd say. Just be nice, they're family. So we'd go, usually for Sunday lunch. Same roast, same mashed potatoes, same dry conversation. The clock ticking in the dining room was louder than anyone's voice. When I was 16, I started noticing something else. The basement door was always locked. And the attic, well, I'd never been up there until one summer when Grandma sent me to fetch an old blanket. I remember the air up there was hot and dusty, filled with the faint smell of mothballs and old wood. There were stacks of boxes, old furniture, and a big wooden trunk tucked beneath the eaves, the kind you'd expect to find treasure in. If you were a kid with an overactive imagination, curiosity got the better of me. The trunk wasn't locked. Inside were piles of yellowed papers, brittle letters, and old photographs. The first few were of my grandparents when they were young, smiling, happy, standing by a lake, but the next stack stopped me cold. They were older than the wedding photos, black and white, some even sepia-toned. Every photo was of a single person staring straight into the camera, unsmiling. Some looked scared. Some looked like they'd been crying. None of them were family. None of them looked familiar at all. On the back of each photo were 2 letters, initials, maybe, and a small arrow pointing either up, down, left, or right. I flipped through dozens of them. Men, women, even kids. Every face seemed haunted. Ethan. I jumped, banging my head on the low beam. Grandma was at the foot of the attic stairs. What are you doing up there? She asked softly, her voice calm, too calm. Just looking for that blanket, I stammered, pushing the photos back into the trunk. Her eyes, those pale gray eyes, watched me for a moment too long. Then she nodded. Come down, dear. Lunch is getting cold. I didn't say a word the rest of the day. After that, I couldn't shake the feeling that they knew, that maybe they'd seen me looking through that trunk. Every time I visited afterward, I felt those eyes on me, not just Grandpa's judgmental stare, but Grandma's soft, knowing smile. Once, while we were sitting on the porch, Grandpa muttered, "Curiosity's a dangerous thing, boy. Can get a man in trouble." He looked right at me when he said it. Years went by. I moved out, went to college, started working. Visits to the farmhouse became less and less frequent. Then one morning, I got a call from my aunt. Her voice was shaky. "They're gone," she said. "Both of them." The sheriff said natural causes. It felt strange. Not exactly sad, just hollow. When we went to clean out the house, the place felt smaller somehow, darker. Dust lay thick on every surface, and the smell of age and something sweet like rotting fruit filled the air. My sister refused to go upstairs. I didn't blame her, but I went. The attic was exactly how I remembered it, except for one thing. The trunk was open this time, and sitting right on top was an envelope with my name on it. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a short letter, written in my grandmother's perfect cursive. "I know it was you who looked through our trunk. Those photographs are not yours to question. They are memories, not yours to carry. Do not disturb them again. With love, Lydia." The letter was dated 3 weeks after my last visit. I looked inside the trunk again. The photographs were still there, but there were new ones too. Color photos this time. Of me. Sitting at their kitchen table, standing in the yard. One of me in the attic from behind. And on the back of the last one, written in the same pen as the old photos, were my initials. E.R. and an arrow pointing straight down. To this day, I keep that letter locked in a box in my closet. Sometimes, late at night, I think about those old photographs, about the people staring at the camera with that same empty fear. And I wonder if they, too, once found an envelope with their name on it. I always hated going back home for the holidays. Every time. It felt like stepping into a time capsule of judgment, silence, and tension thick enough to choke on. Still, that one Thanksgiving a few years back wasn't something I could skip, not without being branded ungrateful for the next decade. I told myself I'd only stay a day, just one meal, smile for the family photos, and get out before the wine started pouring, and the real family came out, the one that pretended everything was fine while quietly falling apart. It had been almost 2 years since I'd seen them. My mom had texted me 3 times that week, each message guiltier than the last. "It's been too long, sweetheart. Everyone's coming this year, don't disappoint your father. You know, family's all we've got." That last one got me. So, Friday morning, I loaded up my old Chevy and made the 5-hour drive back to their place in rural Pennsylvania, the kind of town where the nearest Walmart was 30 miles away and the air smelled like wood smoke and dead leaves. When I pulled into the long gravel driveway, I noticed the house hadn't changed a bit. The same chipped white paint, the same wind chime that clanged too loud, and that same damn oak tree that leaned just a little too close to my old bedroom window. Still, something felt off. Maybe it was the way the windows looked too dark, like there weren't any lights on inside, or maybe it was just me, nervous about facing my family again. I tried to shake it off. The front door opened before I even knocked. My mom stepped out, wearing her favorite maroon sweater, the one she wore every Thanksgiving, but she looked different. Her smile was too wide, and her eyes had this glassy sheen like she'd been crying or hadn't slept in days. "Eli, oh my God, look at you," she said, wrapping me in one of her bone-cracking hugs. "Hey, Mom," I mumbled, trying to breathe. "You're, squeezing pretty tight." She laughed, a quick, almost nervous sound. "Just missed you, honey. It's been too long." When she finally let go, I looked over her shoulder and saw the dining room through the cracked door. The table was already set, candles, silverware, all that fancy stuff we never used. But the turkey was sitting there, uncovered, cold, like it had been out for hours. And the smell. God, that smell. It wasn't the warm, buttery Thanksgiving smell I grew up with. It was faintly burnt, and underneath that, something sour, like spoiled meat. Inside, the air was thick and too warm. The old clock on the wall ticked louder than I remembered. I saw my dad sitting in his armchair in the corner of the living room, just staring at the muted TV screen. No "hey son," no smile, just a nod. He looked older, thinner too. His beard was patchy, and his eyes, normally sharp as nails, seemed unfocused, like he was somewhere else. My sister, Anna, was on the couch, legs tucked up under her, scrolling through her phone like she couldn't wait to be anywhere else. Her husband, Trevor, sat beside her, quiet, eyes darting around like a cornered animal. "Hey," I said, forcing a smile. "Long time no see." Anna looked up. "Yeah." That was it. No hug, no warmth, just that. Dinner was supposed to start at 6. By 6:30, everyone was sitting around the table. My dad had turned off the lights except for the candles, saying it set the mood. The flickering light made their faces look hollow, carved out. I picked at my food. The turkey was dry. The potatoes were cold. Nobody said much, except for Mom, who kept smiling too wide and refilling everyone's glasses with her homemade cranberry wine. Then she said it. "You know," she began, her voice oddly cheerful. "It's funny how Thanksgiving used to mean something. Families surviving the hard times together. When people starved, they made do with what they had." She looked up and smiled. "Sometimes even each other." There was a clatter as Trevor dropped his fork. "Mom," Anna snapped. "What the hell?" Mom just chuckled. "Oh, relax. It's just history, dear. You remember those stories about the settlers? When times were tough, people did what they had to do." Dad leaned forward then, resting his elbows on the table. "Your mother's right," he said quietly. "Most folks today wouldn't last a week if things went south." "What's that supposed to mean?" I asked. He looked straight at me, his voice low. "It means people don't understand survival anymore. They rely on the system. But the system's crumbling, Eli. You'll see soon enough." The room went silent again. Anna was shaking her head, muttering, "Jesus Christ." Trevor stared down at his plate. I could see the sweat gathering on his forehead. "Dad," I said slowly, "you're not still on that doomsday stuff, are you? You told me you got rid of the bunker years ago." His eyes flicked up to me. There was something in them I didn't recognize. Pride, maybe, or madness. Did I? After dinner, I went to the bathroom just to breathe. I could hear them whispering outside, my mom's low voice, my dad's rumbling tone, Anna's quick replies. Every now and then, someone laughed. It didn't sound right. When I came out, I nearly jumped. My mom was standing in the hallway, right by the stairs. "Eli," she said softly, "your father wants to show everyone something in the basement. Don't keep him waiting." My stomach twisted. "What? Why?" Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "It's important, sweetheart. We've all worked so hard on it." That word made me pause. When I got downstairs, I understood why. The basement looked like something out of a survivalist's fever dream. Shelves lined every wall, canned goods, jugs of water, boxes labeled medical, and tools. There were 2 cots in the corner, and a small generator humming quietly. "This is insane," I muttered. Dad beamed. "This is security. When the grid fails, when people panic, we'll be ready." Trevor looked uneasy. Not to sound rude, sir, but what are you expecting to happen exactly?" Dad's smile faltered. "It's not what I expect, son. It's what I know. Society's collapsing. The signs are everywhere. Food shortages, power cuts, violence." He trailed off, then added, "But we'll be safe here." Anna crossed her arms. "You dragged us here for this?" Mom stepped between them. "Honey, we're family. We have to stick together when it happens." "When what happens?" I snapped. "You guys have been living out here like hermits for years." For the first time all night, Dad's voice rose. "Watch your tone." Mom touched his arm gently. "It's okay, dear. He doesn't understand yet." "Understand what?" I demanded. She smiled, that same too wide smile. "The choice we made." I felt my chest tighten. "What choice?" No one answered. Then I noticed something on the far side of the room, a heavy wooden door I'd never seen before. Half hidden behind a stack of crates, a lock hung loose on the latch. "What's that?" I asked. Mom hesitated. "Storage." But Anna's eyes darted toward it. She looked scared. "No, it's not," she whispered. Dad shot her a look sharp enough to cut glass. "Anna, what's behind the door?" I repeated, louder this time. No one spoke, so I walked over and grabbed the handle. The moment I did, Dad lunged. "Don't touch that," he barked, slamming his hand against the doorframe. His face was red, veins standing out in his neck. "What the hell is going on here?" I yelled. Mom's voice was shaking now. "Please, Eli, don't just trust us." I stared at her, at all of them. Trevor was pale, trembling. Anna wouldn't meet my eyes. Something inside me snapped. I shoved the door open. The smell hit first. Rotting meat, decay, metallic and thick in the air. I gagged and stepped back, but I couldn't stop staring. There were coolers lined up against the wall, not just 1 or 2. A dozen, at least. Some of them were leaking dark fluid onto the concrete. In the far corner, there was a butcher's table, a bone saw, and a pair of work gloves still covered in something dark and crusted. My stomach turned over. "What the fuck is this?" I shouted. Dad's voice was eerily calm. "You weren't supposed to see that yet." "Dud." I looked at Anna. "Tell me this isn't what I think it is." Tears filled her eyes. "Eli, they made us—" "Shut your mouth," Dad roared. Trevor bolted for the stairs, but Mom grabbed a kitchen knife from the shelf and pointed it at him. "No one leaves," she said softly, her hand shaking but her eyes dead calm. "Not yet." I backed up slowly. "Mom, put that down." She looked at me, really looked at me, and for a second, her face softened. "You don't understand. We didn't have a choice. The storm last winter. We were trapped for weeks. No food, no help. We did what we had to do." "You ate someone?" I whispered. Her lips trembled. "We thought it was mercy." I couldn't breathe. Dad stepped closer, and when it was over, We realized the world doesn't care about us. We survived because we were willing to do what others wouldn't. That's what family means, Eli. Survival. I stumbled back toward the stairs. You're insane. Maybe, he said. But we're alive. The next few minutes are a blur in my memory. Trevor made a run for the door. Dad grabbed him by the shirt and threw him against the wall. The knife clattered across the floor. Anna screamed. Mom started crying. I remember the sound of something breaking, maybe a jar. Maybe my father's nose when I swung the crowbar I'd grabbed from the tool rack. I didn't look back. I just ran. Out the back door, across the yard, through the trees, cold air burning my lungs, heart pounding so hard it drowned out everything else. I ran until my legs gave out. When the sun came up, I found the highway. A trucker picked me up, said I looked like I'd seen a ghost. I didn't correct him. The police went out there 2 days later. They said the house was empty, no signs of my family, no sign of anyone. The basement was scrubbed clean. The coolers were gone. They chalked it up to miscommunication and told me I'd been under stress. I stopped trying to convince them. Some nights, I wish I'd never opened that door. A few months later, the house burned down. Electrical fire, they said. No bodies found. I moved across the country and changed my number. But every Thanksgiving, around dusk, I get this uneasy feeling like someone's standing just outside my window, watching. And sometimes, I swear I can still smell that faint, sour sweetness of burnt turkey.